What if I told you that everything you recognize as modern life erupted into existence in one single city, in one explosive moment in history, transforming humanity forever? This video was created using AI to bring you the untold story of that transformation. If stories about the hidden origins of our world fascinate you, hit that subscribe button now, because what you're about to discover will change how you see every city, every job, and every polluted skyline around you. Welcome to Manchester, England, circa 1850. Welcome to the place where the future announced itself with a roar. English market town in 1780. Around you, church bells mark the hours. Farmers sell wool and grain in cobblestone squares. The air smells of bread baking and horses passing. Children play in green fields that stretch to the horizon. Life moves at the pace it has moved for centuries, slow, predictable, governed by seasons and sunlight. It's 1850. Those fields are gone. In their place stand massive brick fortresses belching black smoke into a sky you can no longer see. The church bells are drowned out by the deafening clang of metal on metal, the hiss of steam, the screaming of machinery that never stops. The population has exploded from 15,000 to over 300,000. Families are crammed into lightless rooms stacked in endless rows. Rivers run black with chemical waste. The air burns your lungs with every breath. What you're witnessing is the most dramatic transformation in human history, compressed into mere decades. Cities had existed for thousands of years, but they had always grown organically, shaped by geography, religion, trade routes, defensive needs, or the whims of kings and emperors. Manchester was different. Manchester had a single purpose, a singular obsession: production. This was humanity's first city built entirely around machines, and those machines were hungry for coal, for cotton, for human labor, for every waking hour of every living soul within reach. The city didn't evolve. It exploded. It detonated into the landscape like a bomb made of brick, steam, and human ambition. The speed was unprecedented. Infrastructure couldn't keep up with the flood of bodies pouring in from the countryside, from Ireland, from anywhere poverty and desperation drove people toward the promise of work. There was no master plan, no careful urban design, no concern for beauty or health or sustainability. There was only one question that mattered: how fast can we produce? How much can we extract? How efficiently can we turn raw materials into profit? And here's the terrifying part: it worked. Manchester became the richest city on earth. It became Cottonopolis, the beating heart of global industry, the engine that powered the British Empire and reshaped international trade. It proved that a city didn't need tradition or elegance or even basic human dignity. All it needed was relentless, mechanized efficiency. The first thing that hits you is the noise, not just loud, obliterating. The roar of thousands of mechanical looms operating simultaneously creates a wall of sound so intense that conversation becomes impossible. Workers develop a system of hand signals and lip reading just to communicate basic instructions. Many go deaf within years. Children who grow up in the mills sometimes never properly develop speech because they literally cannot hear themselves or others during their formative years. The air is thick with cotton fibers, suspended like a toxic fog. Every breath fills your lungs with microscopic particles that accumulate over time, causing brown lung disease, a slow suffocation that kills workers in their 30s and 40s. The temperature is kept deliberately high to prevent the cotton threads from breaking, turning the mill into a humid hell where workers sweat constantly, dehydrated and dizzy. Then there are the machines themselves, enormous, indifferent, relentlessly dangerous. They have no safety guards, no emergency stops, no concern for the fragile human bodies working alongside them. Arms are caught in spinning mechanisms. Fingers are severed by shuttles moving faster than the eye can track. Children, employed specifically because their small hands can reach into tight spaces beneath operating machinery, are sometimes pulled entirely into the gears, their bodies mangled beyond recognition. And when injury happens, there's no workers' compensation, no medical leave, no sympathy. An injured worker is simply replaced. There are always more desperate people waiting outside the factory gates, willing to risk everything for a wage that barely covers bread and rent. Time itself is reconstructed inside these walls. Your body no longer responds to natural rhythms, sunrise, sunset, hunger, exhaustion. Instead, you wake to the factory bell, work through shifts that can stretch 14 to 16 hours, and collapse when the bell permits it. Your body becomes synchronized with the machine's rhythm, not nature's. You are no longer fully human. You are a component, a biological cog in a mechanical system. This wasn't slavery in the traditional sense. Workers were technically free, but freedom meant only the freedom to starve if you refused work. The choice was simple: submit to the machine or die in the streets. If the mills were where humans learned to be mechanical, the streets of Manchester were where they learned to be invisible. Housing in industrial Manchester was not designed for living, it was designed for storage. Developers crammed as many bodies as possible into the smallest possible space to maximize profit. Back-to-back housing became the standard, rows of brick structures sharing walls on 3 sides, with no rear windows, no ventilation, no light. Families of 6, 8, sometimes 10 people occupied single rooms measuring perhaps 12 feet square. Sanitation was medieval. Dozens of families shared a single outdoor toilet, a crude hole in the ground that was rarely emptied. Human waste accumulated in open cellars and courtyards, creating breeding grounds for cholera, typhoid, and dysentery. When it rained, raw sewage flowed through the streets. Water came from communal pumps, often contaminated by the same waste that poisoned everything else. Typhus spread through lice in unwashed clothing. Tuberculosis thrived in the damp, airless rooms where entire families slept together for warmth. Infant mortality rates were staggering in the poorest districts. Nearly half of all children died before their 5th birthday. And yet people kept coming. Irish families fleeing famine, rural English workers displaced by agricultural mechanization. Each wave of immigration intensified the crowding, drove down wages, and worsened conditions. But still they came, because even this horror was preferable to starvation. The city became a layered trap. Poverty fixed people in place. You couldn't save enough to leave. You couldn't afford to stop working even when sick. Your children had to work instead of receiving education, ensuring they'd remain trapped in the same cycle. Generation after generation, families lived and died within a few filthy streets, never escaping the shadow of the factories that consumed them. We're not talking about teenagers or young adults. We're talking about children as young as 5 or 6 years old, working 12-hour shifts in conditions that would horrify modern sensibilities. Small fingers were perfect for tying broken threads on moving looms. Small bodies could crawl beneath operating machinery to clear cotton debris, a task so dangerous that accidents were routine. These children didn't play, they didn't attend school, many never learned to read. Their spines curved from constant stooping. Their growth was stunted by malnutrition and lack of sunlight. Respiratory diseases ravaged their developing lungs. Industrial accidents left them maimed, disabled, or dead, their brief lives extinguished before they truly began. And this wasn't hidden, everyone knew. Factory owners, government officials, wealthy merchants, they all knew children were being destroyed in service of production. Some reformers raised alarms. Investigations were conducted. Reports were published. But the machines kept running, the profits kept flowing, and the children kept dying. Why? Because child labor was economically efficient. Children were paid a fraction of adult wages. They were compliant, easily controlled, unlikely to organize or resist. In the cold calculus of industrial capitalism, their suffering was simply the cost of doing business. This is the truth we must face. Modern prosperity was built on the broken bodies of children who never got to be children. Here's where the story becomes truly disturbing. Manchester's environmental devastation wasn't seen as a problem. It was celebrated as proof of success. The more smoke in the sky, the more factories were operating. The darker the river, the more dyes and chemicals were being used in textile production. Pollution became a visible scoreboard of economic output. City leaders pointed to the blackened skyline with pride. This was what progress looked like. This was the price of being the workshop of the world. The River Irwell, once clear enough to fish in, turned into a toxic sludge that killed everything it touched. The air became so contaminated that white clothing turned grey within hours. Respiratory illnesses became epidemic. Life expectancy in Manchester's working districts dropped to levels not seen since medieval plagues. But none of this slowed production. If anything, it accelerated. The worse conditions became, the more desperate workers grew, the more willing they were to accept any job at any wage. Degradation fed the system that created it. And other cities watched. They saw Manchester's wealth, they saw its global influence, they saw its power, and they wanted the same thing. Manchester wasn't just one city's experiment. It became the template for industrial civilization worldwide. Cities across Britain copied its model: Birmingham, Leeds, Sheffield, Glasgow. Then the pattern spread across Europe: textile mills in France, steel foundries in Germany, industrial districts in Belgium. It jumped the Atlantic: New England mill towns, Chicago stockyards, Pittsburgh steel plants all followed Manchester's blueprint. And everywhere it went, it brought the same consequences: explosive growth, environmental destruction, worker exploitation, child labor, urban poverty, disease, and inequality, along with unprecedented wealth for those who own the means of production. The lesson was clear: if you wanted to compete in the modern world, you had to accept Manchester's bargain. You had to sacrifice human well-being and environmental health for industrial efficiency. There was no third way. Either you built your own version of Manchester, or you were left behind economically, militarily, politically. This is how one English city's experiment became the foundation of our entire global system. Manchester's story isn't just history, it's a mirror held up to our present moment. Look around you. The factory bells have been replaced by smartphone notifications. The mechanical looms have been replaced by algorithms and AI. The cotton mills have been replaced by fulfillment centers and data farms. But the core pattern remains: human life organized around production, time measured not by natural rhythms but by corporate schedules, pollution accepted as the cost of progress, children's futures sacrificed for immediate profits, speed prioritized over sustainability, efficiency valued above dignity. Manchester also teaches us something hopeful: that systems can change. The horror of industrial Manchester eventually sparked reform movements, labor unions, public health initiatives, environmental regulations, and child labor laws. Progress came slowly, painfully, through the courage of people who refused to accept suffering as inevitable. Their struggle continues in every modern worker fighting for fair wages, every activist demanding environmental protection, every parent insisting their children deserve better than becoming cogs in someone else's machine. The future isn't predetermined. Manchester shows us that entire worlds can be built in a single generation, which means they can also be rebuilt, reimagined, and transformed by people who refuse to accept that profit matters more than people. If this story opened your eyes to something new, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Every week, we use AI to explore the hidden histories that explain our present and might just help us build a better future. Until next time.